I still remember the moment my name echoed through the hospital hallway. It was late at night, and everything around me felt cold and too bright. I had been sitting on that hard plastic chair for so long that my legs had gone numb. I was holding a small cup of water, but I wasn't really drinking it. I just needed something to hold so my hands wouldn't shake. "Mrs. Hale?" The voice was soft, almost unsure. I looked up slowly, expecting a doctor, or maybe someone asking about paperwork. Instead, I saw a young nurse standing at the end of the hallway. She looked nervous, like she wasn't supposed to be there. She kept glancing around as if she wanted to make sure no one was watching. When she walked toward me, her shoes barely made a sound on the floor. She didn't smile. She didn't ask how I was. She simply stopped in front of me, leaned down a little, and whispered in the lowest voice I had ever heard, "Ma'am, please don't go home tonight." I blinked at her, confused. I thought I misheard her. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Why?" She shook her head quickly. Her eyes were full of worry. "I can't explain," she whispered, "but you must not go home. Not tonight." My heart began to beat faster. I felt a cold shiver move through my back. "Is something wrong?" I asked. She opened her mouth like she wanted to answer, but then someone at the nurse's station called her name. She stepped back, fear in her eyes, and whispered one more time, "Please, Mrs. Hale, stay somewhere else tonight." Then she walked away fast, like she needed to put distance between herself and her own words. I sat there, frozen. Everything felt strange. The bright hospital lights, the empty hallway, the soft beep of machines coming from nearby rooms, it all suddenly felt unreal, like a dream I couldn't wake up from. Outside, through the glass doors, I saw the faint reflection of flashing police lights. A car had passed, not fast, not loud, but enough to make my stomach twist again. "My name is Margaret Hale, and I was 59 years old the night a stranger warned me not to return to my own home. For most of my life, I believed home was the safest place in the world, a place where you could lock the door, take off your shoes, and let your shoulders relax. A place where danger couldn't follow you, a place filled with familiar smells, familiar sounds, familiar memories. But the nurse's whisper made something inside me break, just a little. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak. I walked toward the sliding doors, and the cold night air hit me the moment they opened. I wrapped my arms around myself. The parking lot was almost empty. Only a few cars sat under the streetlights, their windows dark. I stood there for a long moment trying to think. The more I tried to stay calm, the more the nurse's voice repeated in my head, "Don't go home tonight." It didn't feel like a warning about something outside my house. It felt like a warning about something, or someone inside it. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. A missed call from an unknown number. I stared at it, and a strange feeling washed over me. I didn't know who it was, but I knew it wasn't random. I tried to breathe slowly, in and out. But the cold air felt too thin. For the first time, the thought came to me so clearly it almost hurt. Maybe I already knew something was wrong at home. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. I sat down on a metal bench near the entrance. It felt cold under my legs. I looked out at the dark road, the moving shadows, the distant streetlights. Everything seemed normal, but nothing felt normal. I had lived in my house for 14 years. I planted flowers in the front garden. I painted the kitchen yellow because I wanted the mornings to feel warm. I placed soft blankets on the couch because I liked comfort. I always believed that if you cared for a space, it would care for you back. But that night, for the first time, I felt afraid of the place I called home. Another police car drove by. This one didn't have its lights on. It moved slowly, too slowly. My fingers tightened around my phone. I opened my contacts and hovered over my daughter's name, Elise. I wanted to call her, to say something, anything. But I didn't know what to tell her. I didn't even understand what was happening to myself. I looked at my reflection in the glass door. My face looked pale, my eyes looked different, wider, confused, like they were searching for answers that had been hidden from me for too long. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that maybe the nurse was mistaken, that maybe she meant someone else. But deep down, a small voice inside me whispered back, "Margaret, you know she didn't." I thought about my husband, Daniel. I tried to picture him sitting in the living room, reading the newspaper like he always did. I tried to imagine the house exactly as I left it that morning. But for some reason, I couldn't. Every image felt wrong. The nurse's warning had cracked something open inside me, something I had kept sealed for months without realizing it. As I sat there, watching the quiet night, I felt myself reaching a truth I had been avoiding. Something dangerous was waiting for me at home, and the next step I took would change everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and my own safety. Slowly, I stood up again. If I wanted to understand why the nurse whispered that warning, I had to start from the beginning. Before that night in the hospital, my life looked calm from the outside. If anyone had asked me how things were going, I would have smiled politely and said, "Everything is fine." And I truly believed it, or at least I tried to. My home stood on a quiet street with tall trees on both sides. It was the kind of place where people waved while walking their dogs, and where the mailman knew everyone's name. When I first moved into that house, it felt like a fresh start after years of loneliness. My first husband, Michael, had passed away from a sudden heart attack when I was 46. Losing him broke something deep inside me. He was gentle, patient, and always laughed first during an argument. When he died, the world became gray for a long time. I met Daniel 5 years later at a community event. He was helpful, polite, and always ready with kind words. He told me I carried sadness in my eyes. I didn't know whether to admit it or hide it, so I just smiled. A year later, we got married. It wasn't a grand love story like my first marriage, but it felt stable, safe, predictable. And after grief, sometimes predictable feels like a gift. Our home together wasn't perfect, but it was comfortable. Every morning, I woke up before him, made coffee, opened the kitchen window, and let the fresh air in. I would watch the sunlight fall across the blue tiles I had chosen myself. I loved those tiles. They reminded me of calm ocean water. I worked part-time at the local library. The library was small, with old shelves that creaked when children ran between them. I loved the quiet there, the soft rustling of pages, the gentle hum of the air conditioner, the warm smell of old books. There was something healing about being surrounded by stories that had lived longer than I had. At home, my evenings followed a simple rhythm. I cooked dinner around 6 p.m., usually soup, rice, or something light, and Daniel came home around 6:30. He always placed his briefcase on the same chair, loosened his tie, and asked how my day was. His voice was calm, steady, almost soothing. When he finished eating, he often sat in the living room with the TV on low volume while I washed the dishes. We rarely argued. Sometimes we disagreed about small things, what color to paint the bedroom, whether we needed a new microwave, but nothing serious. We lived like two people sharing quiet space, not like lovers full of fire, but like companions who respected each other's distance. I had a hobby, too, pottery. After Michael died, I stopped doing most of the things I loved, but pottery slowly brought me back to myself. Working with clay made me feel grounded. Clay doesn't lie. It shows every mistake, every shake in your hands, every hesitation. I had a small pottery wheel in the garage, and I spent many afternoons there, shaping bowls and cups while soft music played in the background. My daughter Elise visited sometimes. She lived about 40 minutes away and worked long hours as a teacher. Our relationship was good, but not as close as before. She tried to accept Daniel, but I could tell she kept a little distance. She once told me he felt too smooth, like someone who practiced being perfect. I laughed it off at the time. I didn't want to believe anything negative. After losing so much once, I wanted to hold on to peace, even if it was fragile. Looking back now, I realize how many little things I ignored. But in those days, I only saw the surface, the clean house, the calm husband, the warm dinners, the safe routines. I thought that meant stability. Daniel had his own habits, too. He liked keeping things neat. He polished his shoes every Sunday. He organized his closet by color. He kept his work papers stacked in perfect piles. I saw these habits as a sign of discipline, maybe even responsibility. I never imagined they could also be signs of control. There was one thing, though, that always felt strange, something I didn't think about much at the time: the basement. When we moved into the house, we divided spaces naturally. I took the kitchen, the living room, and the garage for pottery. Daniel took the basement. He said he wanted it for projects, though I never saw a single project come out of there. He kept the door locked, but I didn't question it. Everyone deserves privacy, I told myself. And I didn't want to be the type of wife who snooped. Now, thinking back, I can see how blind I was to the truth that lived right beneath my feet. But back then, I was content. Truly content. I remember one evening clearly. I was in the garden pulling out small weeds, and Daniel came out with 2 cups of tea. He handed one to me, smiled softly, and said, "We have a good life, don't we, Margaret?" I nodded, believing every word. I thought the quiet moments were signs of a strong marriage. But now I understand something I didn't know then. Quiet can hide danger as easily as it hides peace. Still, that was my world, a soft, simple world, a world where I trusted the man sleeping beside me, a world where I felt safe enough to fall asleep without checking the locks twice. If someone had told me then that everything I believed was only half the truth, that the walls of my home held secrets I couldn't imagine, I would have laughed. Because nothing in my daily life hinted at anything dark. Nothing in Daniel's calm face suggested betrayal. Nothing in our routine warned me that a storm was coming, and yet the storm was already there. I just hadn't opened my eyes to see it. The life I thought was safe was slowly cracking, quietly shifting, and I didn't notice a thing. Not until the night a nurse whispered words that made my heart stop. At first, the changes were so small that I barely noticed them. They slipped into my days like tiny shadows, easy to ignore, easy to explain away. But now, looking back, I can see how every shadow was a warning, and every warning was a truth I refused to face. It began with Daniel's phone calls. He used to leave his phone on the kitchen counter or the living room table. Sometimes he even forgot where he put it. But slowly, that changed. He started keeping it in his pocket all the time. When it rang, he stepped outside, even if it was cold. He didn't speak loudly. His voice became low and tight, like he didn't want anyone, not even the walls, to hear what he was saying. When he came back inside, he always had the same calm smile on his face. "Work call," he would say, "just a small issue." And I believed him. After all, his job was demanding, stressful, busy. At least, that's what he told me. But the calls kept coming, late at night, early in the morning, during dinner, and each time he took the phone with him and closed the door behind him. The sound of the door clicking softly became a part of our routine. Another shadow appeared when I started finding new tools in the basement hallway: a screwdriver set, a heavy toolbox, strange electrical equipment I didn't recognize. I would ask him about it, and he always replied with the same quiet tone, "Just work stuff." He never explained more, and I never pushed. One afternoon, I walked past the basement door and tried to turn the knob. It didn't move. It was locked. I stood there, staring at the doorknob for a long moment. I couldn't remember the last time I had seen the door unlocked, maybe months, maybe longer. Still, I told myself it was normal. Some people like privacy. Some people need their own space. And Daniel had always been a private man. I tried to ignore the small discomfort that settled in my stomach, but the shadows didn't stop there. Around that time, I noticed a car parked on our street more often than usual, a dark gray sedan with tinted windows. It didn't belong to any of our neighbors. Sometimes it stayed for 10 minutes, sometimes for hours. I would look at it through the blinds, trying not to seem obvious. I could never see the driver clearly, just the outline of a man sitting quietly inside. When I mentioned it to Daniel, he shrugged. "Probably someone waiting for a friend," he said. "Don't worry about things like that." So I didn't, or I tried not to. Then there were the moments when Daniel came home later than usual, with excuses that sounded simple but felt strange. Traffic. Late meeting. Stopped by a store. He always sounded calm, too calm. His shirt was never wrinkled, his hair never messy. He never looked rushed or tired. One night he came home past 10 p.m. He walked in with that same smooth expression, but for the first time I saw something different, something like relief, as if he had escaped something or finished something. I asked if everything was okay. He gave me a small smile and kissed my forehead. "Of course," he said, "everything is fine." But I didn't feel fine. The next shadow arrived through my daughter. Elise stopped by one weekend for a surprise visit. We had tea in the kitchen while Daniel worked outside. She kept looking at me with worry in her eyes. "Mom," she said softly, "are you sure you're okay living with him?" I frowned, confused. "Why would you ask that?" She hesitated, twisting the handle of her mug. He watches you a lot. Not normal watching, more like checking on you, and he kept talking about your will last time I visited." My heart tightened. "He was just planning ahead," I told her quickly. "After your father died, it made him think about the future." But Elise didn't look convinced. "Something about him feels wrong," she whispered. "I can't explain it." I changed the subject. I didn't want to talk about this. I didn't want to believe my daughter might be seeing something I couldn't. But her words stayed with me. A few nights later, I heard voices coming from the hallway. Daniel was on the phone again. The door to the guest room was partly open, and his voice drifted through the crack. I didn't mean to listen. I only meant to walk to the bathroom. But when I heard my name, my full maiden name, I froze. "Margaret Ann Walker," he said. No one called me by that name anymore, not even my relatives. Then I heard him add, "No, she still has no idea." The words hit me like cold water. I stood there, my hand on the wall, trying to understand what he meant. She still has no idea. About what? When he ended the call, I walked quickly into the bathroom and closed the door, pretending I had just arrived. I washed my hands slowly, trying to calm myself. When I came out, Daniel was already in the hallway. He smiled at me like nothing had happened. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I lied. But inside something had changed. A small seed of fear had taken root. The next week, the house felt different to me. Not louder, not darker, just different, like the air had shifted. I noticed how often Daniel checked the mail before I could, how quickly he closed his laptop when I entered the room, how he paused before answering questions, as if choosing every word carefully. I also noticed how my own behavior changed. I moved more quietly. I double-checked doors. I avoided asking too many questions. I told myself I was being silly, but part of me knew the truth. I was starting to feel unsafe in my own home. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. My eyes looked tired, not from age, from worry, from confusion, from the feeling that something big, something hidden, was sitting right in front of me, waiting for me to see it. But I wasn't ready yet. For years I had trained myself to choose peace over conflict, calm over questions, silence over fear. And that habit kept me from facing what was right in front of me. The shadows were getting longer, and soon they would turn into something I could no longer ignore. The day everything opened began like any other ordinary afternoon. I had just finished wiping down the kitchen counters. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels normal at first, but then starts to feel too heavy when you stand still long enough. Daniel hadn't returned from work yet, so I decided to tidy the hallway before starting dinner. I picked up his jacket from the back of the dining chair. It slipped from my hands, landing on the floor with a soft thud. Something small and metallic rolled out and hit the wall with a tiny click. I bent down slowly, thinking it was just a button or a coin. But it wasn't. It was a small silver key. My first thought was simple. Probably a storage key. But something inside me, an instinct I had ignored for months, made me pick it up with more care than I expected. The key was longer than usual, with a strange shape at the top. It looked old, heavy, important. I stood there in the hallway, holding that key, feeling its weight press into my palm. And then my eyes drifted toward the basement door. The one that had been locked for so long, I couldn't remember the last time I saw it open. My heart started to beat harder. I walked toward the door slowly, as if something might hear me. The key felt warm from being in Daniel's pocket. When I reached the door, my hand shook slightly as I pushed the key into the lock. I expected it not to fit, but it did. Perfectly. When I turned the key, the lock clicked open with a soft sound that made the hair on my arm stand up. For a long moment, I just stood there, frozen. My breath felt thin. I didn't know whether to open the door or walk away from it forever. But something deep inside me whispered, "You need to see." So I pushed the door open. A cold draft brushed against my face. The air inside smelled like metal and dust, not like a place where someone did projects. I reached for the light switch and turned it on. At the bottom of the stairs, boxes were stacked neatly in rows. Not random boxes, not storage boxes. These were labeled, organized, arranged with purpose. The kind of organization that has meaning. The kind that hides something, not stores something. I stepped down the stairs one slow step at a time. Each step creaked, echoing in the cold room. The light flickered once, then stayed steady. The first thing I saw made my chest tighten. A row of boxes marked with my name. Not Margaret, not Margaret Hale, but my maiden name, Margaret Ann Walker. I stared at the label, my mouth going dry. I hadn't used that name publicly in years. I didn't write it. I didn't say it. I didn't even think of myself as that person anymore. But Daniel did, and he had written it many times, on every box. I opened the first box with trembling hands. Inside were papers, dozens of them, my medical records, old prescriptions, copies of my ID, my birth certificate, papers I didn't even have myself anymore. Why did Daniel have them? I opened another box, and another. Each one felt like peeling off a layer of my life, only to discover that someone else had been watching it more closely than I had. Then I saw a folder on the table. It was thick, heavy, labeled with my name again. I hesitated before opening it, afraid of what I might see. But fear didn't stop my hands. Inside the folder, there were documents I had never seen before. One was a life insurance policy with my name at the top. It had been changed recently, barely a month ago. The beneficiary was not who it used to be. It wasn't a lease. It wasn't me. It wasn't a trust. It was Daniel. Another paper caught my eye, a medical report. The report claimed I was showing signs of memory loss, early dementia. Increasing forgetfulness, it said, possible cognitive decline. I felt dizzy. I had never done this test. I had never complained about my memory. I didn't forget things. Not like that. Then I noticed something that made my skin crawl, my signature at the bottom, except it wasn't my signature. It looked close, very close, but not mine. Someone had forged it. I backed away from the table, my breath shaking. My eyes moved toward a thick envelope at the center of the folder. It was sealed, and on the top, someone had written a date in bold letters. Last Thursday. Just 3 days ago. My hands trembled as I lifted it. The envelope felt heavy, not with weight, but with meaning. I didn't open it yet. I couldn't. Not while I was still trying to understand everything else around me. Then I saw something even worse. A second envelope. Older. Yellowed. Dated the day before Daniel and I got married. I stared at it, stunned. Why would Daniel write something the day before our wedding? Why hide it? Why keep it sealed for all these years? Why store it down here, where I would never find it? My heart pounded in my ears. Something in the room felt wrong. Not just the papers, not just the boxes, but the intention behind them. This wasn't storage. This wasn't work. This wasn't normal. This was planning. Planning something about me. Planning something around my life. Planning something for my future that I didn't know about. My hand went to my mouth as I tried to breathe. My legs felt weak as I sat on a small metal stool near the table. I tried to calm myself, tried to think clearly, tried to understand the meaning behind everything I had found. But before I could make sense of it, I heard a sudden noise behind me. A knock. A knock at the front door. I froze, my whole body tensed. I moved quietly back up the stairs, not turning off the basement light. I reached the hallway and stopped at the bottom of the staircase. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I peeked out from the corner. A man stood at the front door. Someone I had never seen before. He wore a dark coat and kept looking over his shoulder, like he didn't want anyone to see him. Then he slid something under the door and walked away fast. I waited until I couldn't hear his steps anymore before picking up the envelope on the floor. On the front, in shaky handwriting, were 4 words: "For your safety, urgently." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a small card with a number written on it, and one short message: "He is not who you think." I stared at the words until they blurred. Then, slowly, painfully, a realization formed inside me, soft at first, then sharp enough to cut. This house wasn't mine anymore. My life wasn't mine anymore. My reality wasn't mine anymore. There were secrets in every corner of my home, secrets Daniel built slowly, quietly, carefully, secrets I had walked past every day, secrets that were now opening all at once. The envelope from Thursday, the envelope from before the wedding, the forged papers, the insurance policy, the locked basement, all of it pointed to one truth. I didn't know the man I lived with, not even a little. And whatever he was planning, whatever he had written inside those envelopes, I wasn't sure I wanted to open them alone, but I knew I would have to, because this was only the beginning of what I was about to uncover. I don't remember climbing the rest of the stairs. I only remember standing in the hallway with the 2 envelopes in my hands, one new, one old, feeling like the floor beneath me was no longer solid. My heart beat so hard it made my palms shake. I kept thinking, this cannot be real. Not Daniel, not my husband. But the basement was real. The forged papers were real. The stranger at the door was real. I walked into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. The house felt colder than usual, even though the heater hummed softly. I placed the envelopes on the coffee table and stared at them. My own name written by someone else. My past and my future sealed inside paper I never touched. I tried to breathe slowly, but every breath felt too shallow. I folded my hands on my lap, hoping it would steady me, but instead I felt the shaking move into my shoulders. I told myself I needed to stay calm. I needed to think. But calmness was impossible when your whole world shifts in one afternoon. I looked around the room, trying to see it the way I always had. The framed wedding photo on the wall, the lamp with the warm yellow shade, the soft blanket folded neatly over the couch. All the things that used to feel comforting now felt strange, almost unfamiliar, like the house belonged to someone else, someone who just pretended to be me. For the first time, I noticed how quiet everything was. Not peaceful quiet, but heavy quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're being watched. I picked up the newer envelope, the one dated Thursday, and held it in my hands. I didn't open it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to see what Daniel had written days ago, while he slept next to me as if everything was normal. The idea made my stomach twist. The older envelope scared me even more. The date from the day before our wedding felt like a punch to my chest. What kind of man writes something and hides it right before saying his vows? What kind of promise did he make on paper that I didn't know about? I put the envelopes back on the table and pressed my hands over my face. My eyes burned. I didn't want to cry, but my body didn't care what I wanted. Tears slid down my cheeks, slow and hot. I whispered to myself, "How long have I been blind?" My phone vibrated on the couch beside me, making me jump. It was Elise. I wiped my face quickly and answered. "Hello?" Her voice was soft, but instantly worried. "Mom, are you okay? You sound strange." I closed my eyes. I wanted to tell her everything, the basement, the papers, the envelopes, the stranger, but the words got stuck in my throat. I didn't want to pull her into something dangerous if I didn't even understand it myself. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired." She didn't believe me. I could hear it in the way she breathed. "Mom, is Daniel there?" "No," I said quickly. "He isn't home yet." There was a long pause on her end. Then slowly she said, "Don't stay alone with him tonight." Her words hit me like the nurse's whisper, but I forced a small laugh. "Elise, that's silly." "Mom," she said, her voice firm now, "please listen to me. Something about him has felt wrong for a long time, and I can't explain it, but I feel scared for you right now. Please just come stay with me tonight." My throat tightened again. Tears filled my eyes. I wanted to go. God, I wanted to go. But I felt glued to the house, trapped by the very evidence I had found. "I'll be okay," I whispered. "I just need some time." She tried again, but I gently ended the call, promising we'd talk tomorrow. I stared at my phone after the call ended, wishing I had told her everything, wishing I had the courage to admit the truth. I was scared. Outside, I heard a car door slam. I froze. His car. Daniel's. I stood up from the couch so fast that the blanket fell to the floor. My heart raced as I looked toward the front door. The handle turned. I grabbed the envelopes and held them behind my back without thinking. Daniel walked in with a smile, the same calm smile he always wore. He set his briefcase on the chair, loosened his tie, and looked at me. "You're standing," he said lightly. "Everything okay?" I forced a nod, my voice trapped behind fear. He didn't seem to notice. He walked closer, the floor creaking under his steps. Then he stopped. His eyes moved toward the basement door. It was slightly open, a mistake I didn't realize I made. His smile faded, not quickly, slowly, like someone pulling down a curtain, revealing another face behind it. "When did you go downstairs?" he asked quietly. I couldn't speak. My lips trembled. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression blank, unreadable. Then he said, "You shouldn't go into places you don't understand." Something about the way he said it made my skin feel cold. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But my legs felt weak, like they weren't mine. He walked past me, closing the basement door gently, too gently. When he turned back, his smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm going to shower," he said. "Why don't you start dinner?" His tone was soft, but underneath it I heard something new, something sharp. Something that made me feel like the house itself was holding its breath. He walked down the hallway and disappeared into the bathroom. The sound of the shower started moments later. The second he closed the door, I let out the breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands shook violently. The envelopes slipped from my fingers and fell to the rug. I bent down, picked them up, and held them to my chest. I knew then that I couldn't stay another minute, not with him, not with the truth I had found, not with the danger building around me. I grabbed my coat, my purse, and the envelopes. I didn't take anything else, not photos, not clothes, not jewelry. I just ran. I didn't stop to look back at the house. I didn't want to see the windows glowing behind me like silent eyes. I got into my car, started the engine with shaking hands, and drove. I didn't have a destination. I didn't have a plan. I only had fear guiding me. Fear. And the horrible truth that the man I slept beside for years had been preparing for something I still didn't understand. I drove until I reached the hospital. My hands were still shaking when I parked. And moments later, the nurse would whisper the words that would confirm what I already felt. My life was no longer safe. I didn't sleep at all that night in the hospital. I sat in the same chair for hours, holding the 2 envelopes in my lap, watching the hallway lights flicker slowly. Nurses walked past from time to time, their shoes tapping softly on the floor, but no one spoke to me. Maybe they could see in my face that I wasn't ready for conversation. The warning the nurse whispered still echoed in my mind, "Don't go home tonight." She didn't need to explain. I already understood enough to know she was right. For years I thought danger was something loud, storms, arguments, accidents, but real danger moves quietly. It hides inside calm voices, polite smiles, and tidy houses. It doesn't rush. It waits. And Daniel had been waiting a long time. I stared at the envelopes again. My fingers brushed the dates written on them, one from days ago, one from before our wedding, both pointing toward a truth I wasn't ready to see. But I knew tonight was the end of running away from it. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "You cannot pretend any more, not after this." Those words felt like a door unlocking inside me. For years, I had pushed aside doubts because I wanted peace, because I wanted to believe I was safe, because I didn't want to go through grief again. But now, sitting under the hospital lights, I realized something important. Pretending had almost cost me my life. I straightened in the chair, wiped my face, and picked up my phone. My hands still shook a little, but there was a steadiness forming inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time. I called Elise. She answered on the second ring, worry already in her voice. "Mom? Where are you? What's going on?" "I'm at the hospital," I said quietly. She gasped. "Are you hurt?" "No," I said. "I'm okay, but I can't go home." There was a long silence. Then, in a trembling voice, Elise said, "Mom, what did he do?" I closed my eyes, feeling tears burn behind them. "I don't know yet," I whispered, "but I found something, and I need time to understand it. Come stay with me," she said immediately. "Right now." I hesitated. I didn't want to bring danger to her doorstep. "Not tonight," I said. "Please trust me. I need to figure a few things out first." She didn't like it, but she didn't argue. "Promise me you'll stay somewhere safe." "I promise." After the call, I walked to the small coffee station in the hallway and poured myself a cup of warm water. I didn't drink it. I just held it, letting the heat calm my fingers, while my mind slowly pieced things together. I'd always seen myself as someone gentle, someone who avoided conflict, someone who kept peace even when it cost her comfort. But tonight, I felt something new rising inside me. Not anger, not revenge, not even fear. Clarity. Quiet clarity, the kind that comes when a woman has finally had enough. I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelopes, and unsealed the newer one first. My heart thudded in my chest as I unfolded the papers inside. It was worse than I expected. Inside was a list of steps, a plan written in Daniel's handwriting, cold, organized, without emotion, a plan about me. Step 1, adjust insurance beneficiary. Step 2, collect supporting medical evidence. Step 3, begin discussions with care facility. Step 4, transfer joint assets. Step 5, finalize relocation. My hands trembled. Relocation. He didn't mean himself, he meant me. He was preparing to put me in a memory care home, a place where no one would question why I wasn't allowed to make decisions, a place where no one would notice if something went wrong. I pressed a hand to my chest, forcing myself to breathe through the shock. Then I opened the older envelope, the one from before the wedding. My fingers shook as I unfolded the yellowed paper. It was a contract, an agreement, something written between him and another person, with my name mentioned throughout, even before I became his wife. It wasn't marriage I had stepped into. It was a plan, a long-term plan that started years before I said I do. My breath came out shaky, but something inside me steadied. The fear didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It became focus, direction. I whispered to myself, "You need to get proof, real proof." The hospital felt like the only safe place left, so I began to plan there, under the fluorescent lights, my mind more awake than it had been in years. First, I needed a lawyer, a real one, someone who understood financial fraud and medical forgery. I quickly searched online and found a firm known for handling elder exploitation cases. The word elder made my heart sting, but I pushed that aside. I dialed the number. A woman answered, her voice calm and steady. "How can we help you?" And for the first time, I said the truth out loud. "I think my husband is trying to harm me." She didn't laugh. She didn't sound surprised. She just said, "Come in tomorrow morning. We will help." That one sentence gave me a strength I hadn't felt in a long time. Next, I called my doctor. I asked for an appointment and explained that someone had forged a medical report under my name. He was shocked and told me to come in immediately the next day. He would write a statement confirming I had no signs of memory loss. Piece by piece, my plan was forming. Then I checked our financial accounts from my phone, transfers, withdrawals, payments I didn't recognize, some sent to a name I had never seen. He had been preparing for years, slowly, quietly, counting on me to never notice. But now I noticed everything, every detail, every lie, every shadow that suddenly made sense. A nurse walked by and paused, touching my arm lightly. "Do you need anything?" I shook my head. "No, thank you. I'm okay." And I meant it. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt okay. Not safe, but strong. When the clock reached nearly 3 a.m., I stood up and walked outside. The air was cold, fresh, steady. I pulled my coat tighter around me and looked at the sky. There were no stars, only clouds, but somehow the darkness felt less frightening than the house I had left behind. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "You're not the same woman you were yesterday." I wasn't the quiet wife anymore. I wasn't the woman who ignored small warnings. I wasn't the woman who trusted too easily. I was a woman with truth in her hands, a woman with proof, a woman ready to protect herself. I looked at the hospital doors behind me one last time. The warning that brought me here had changed everything. Now it was my turn to act. Tomorrow, I would meet the lawyer. Tomorrow, I would get the medical statement. Tomorrow, I would start uncovering the full extent of Daniel's lies. And tomorrow, he would begin to lose the control he thought he had forever. Tonight, I made up my mind. I was done being afraid. The next morning, I woke up in the hospital waiting room with my coat wrapped tightly around me. My neck hurt from sleeping against the chair, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I gathered my things, checked that both envelopes were still inside my purse, and walked outside into the cool morning air. The sky was gray, but it felt clearer than my own home ever had. I drove straight to the lawyer's office. The building was simple, with clean windows and a quiet parking lot. I sat in my car for a few minutes, letting myself breathe before going inside. My hands were steady now, not because I wasn't afraid, but because fear had turned into something stronger, something that pushed me forward. Inside, a receptionist greeted me softly and led me to a small room. After a short wait, a woman in her early 40s walked in. Her expression was calm, professional, but also surprisingly warm. "I'm Clara," she said. "You must be Margaret." I nodded. "Thank you for seeing me so quickly." She sat across from me, folding her hands gently. "Tell me what's happening." I reached into my purse and placed the forged medical report on the table. Then I placed the insurance papers, then the envelopes. Clara didn't interrupt. She didn't react with shock or confusion. She simply listened. When I finished explaining what I had found, she took a slow breath. "Mrs. Hale," she said softly, "you are in real danger." Hearing someone else say it out loud made my chest tighten, but instead of fear, I felt clarity. Clara continued, "Your husband has been building a legal case around you, forging medical documents, changing financial information, preparing to move you into a care facility. This is a pattern we've seen in elder financial abuse cases." The word elder stung again, but I let it pass. "Can he be stopped?" I asked. Clara nodded firmly. "Yes, but we need evidence, more than what you've already brought." She leaned forward. "You need to gather records, bank statements, phone logs, anything unusual in your home, and you must avoid returning there alone." Avoid returning. But I knew I had to go back at some point, not to live there, but to collect proof, to find the rest of what he had hidden. Clara seemed to read my mind. "If you must go, go at a time he won't be there, and do not stay long. Take photos, gather documents, and leave." I nodded, gripping my purse tightly. "I will." After the meeting, I drove straight to my doctor's office. He knew me well. When he saw the forged report, he looked both shocked and angry. "You've never shown any signs of memory issues," he said. "I'll write a full statement immediately." It was another piece of the puzzle, another cut in Daniel's plan. I spent the rest of the morning calling banks, checking accounts, and requesting printed statements. When the bank employee handed me the thick stack of papers, my stomach dropped. There were dozens of transfers I didn't recognize, some large, some small. Some sent every month to the same name, a name I had never heard before, Thomas Kane. Who was this man? Why was Daniel sending him money? The more I uncovered, the less I recognized the life I had been living. By noon, I had dozens of documents in my bag. My next step was the hardest, returning to the house. I waited until I was sure Daniel was at work. Then I drove there slowly, parking a little down the street so my car wouldn't be obvious. Walking up the front steps felt like walking toward a place that belonged to someone else. The air around the house felt thick, heavy, as if it remembered everything I didn't know yet. I unlocked the door and slipped inside quietly. The house looked the same, but I felt like a stranger walking through it. I took out my phone and began taking photos of the basement door, the hallway, the boxes downstairs, the documents, everything that could help prove what was happening. The basement felt even colder than before. I opened more boxes, searching through papers I had been too overwhelmed to examine yesterday. Most of it was information about me, old bills, old medical records, photocopies of documents that no one else should have. Then, in the bottom of one box, I found something that made my hands go numb. A set of printed emails, between Daniel and someone else. The name at the top of each message made my stomach twist, Thomas Kane. Their conversation was about me. Every message had my name in it. They wrote about my habits, my health, my routine, my value. One message from Daniel said, "She trusts me completely. It won't be difficult." Another said, "Her assets are almost cleared. One more step." I felt the room spin. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. Whatever this was, it wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't even just manipulation. It was a long-term plan to use me, erase me, or remove me. Someone knocked on the front door. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. I stood still, barely breathing. The knock came again, firmer this time. I tiptoed up the stairs and peeked through the window. A man stood on the porch. Not Daniel, not the man from yesterday, someone different, middle-aged, tall, wearing a black coat. He knocked again, then pulled out his phone, checked the number, and looked at my house one more time before leaving. He didn't look confused. He looked like someone checking on something, or someone. I watched him walk to the same gray sedan I'd seen parked on the street before. The car drove away slowly. My fear changed again, not into panic, but into determination. Whoever these men were, they were part of Daniel's life, and I needed to know how. I grabbed everything I could, papers, emails, photos, and put them in my bag. Then I locked the basement, turned off the lights, and left the house without looking back. The next step was to visit Daniel's workplace. I didn't want to, but I needed answers. I drove there and walked into the office lobby. The receptionist looked up, surprised. "Hello, are you here to see Mr. Hale?" "Yes," I said. "Is he available?" She checked her computer. "He's in a meeting." "Can I speak to someone who works closely with him?" I asked. She hesitated, then called someone. A few minutes later, a man in his 50s walked out. His face looked tired, and when he saw me, his eyes widened slightly, like he recognized me from somewhere he wasn't supposed to. "You're Daniel's wife," he said quietly. "Yes, and I need to ask a few questions." We stepped into a small empty office. The man closed the door and rubbed his forehead. "I knew this would happen eventually," he said softly. My breath caught in my throat. "Knew what?" He looked at me, guilt in his eyes. "Daniel. He's been involved in things for a long time, things I tried to stay away from. But Thomas, he's dangerous." The name hit me again, harder. "Who is Thomas?" The man hesitated. "Someone Daniel owes, someone who helps him, with his plans." "What plans?" I whispered. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "You need to stay away from both of them. Whatever Daniel tells you, whatever he pretends, it's not real. Why didn't you warn me?" He looked down. "Because people who get involved with them disappear." A cold chill ran down my arms. My whole body felt heavy. This wasn't just betrayal. This was danger with layers I hadn't even uncovered yet. I left the building without speaking to Daniel. I couldn't. Not yet. As I walked to my car, one thought repeated in my mind. He never expected me to fight back. But now, with every truth uncovered, every document found, every secret exposed, I was becoming someone he could no longer control, someone he could no longer use, someone he could no longer silence. I drove away with a new strength building inside me. The woman Daniel thought he married was gone. The woman walking away from his world now was not afraid anymore. She was ready. She was watching. She was prepared to expose everything. The morning after visiting Daniel's workplace, I woke up in the small hotel room I had booked last minute. The thin curtains let in a soft gray light, and for a moment, I forgot where I was. Then everything came rushing back: the basement, the forged papers, the emails, the man at the office who told me people disappear. I sat up slowly, pressing my hands against my face. Today would be the day everything came out. I could feel it in my bones, the same way you feel a storm coming even when the sky looks calm. I checked my bag to make sure every document was still there: the envelopes, the emails, the bank records, Clara's notes, my doctor's statement. All of it felt heavier than paper. It felt like the truth I had been blind to for years. I took a deep breath and called my daughter. "Elise? Mom, where are you? I'm worried." "I'm safe," I said gently, "and I need you to meet someone with me today." "Who?" "A lawyer." There was a pause, then she said, "I'll be there." By the time I reached Clara's office again, my hands were cold, but my spine felt straight for the first time in months. Elise arrived minutes later, her face full of worry and anger. When she hugged me, I felt my chest loosen. Having her beside me made me stronger. Inside the conference room, Clara spread all the documents across the table. She studied each page carefully, placing sticky notes on the edges. When she finally looked up, she said, "You have enough to file charges today." Hearing that made my whole body shake, not with fear, but with a strange mix of relief and sadness. "What happens now?" I asked. "We take everything to the authorities," Clara said. "We explain the fraud, the forged medical reports, the financial transfers, and the plan he created around you. And Margaret—" She paused. "We request an immediate protective order." Elise grabbed my hand. "We're doing this. No more waiting." I nodded. Clara drove us to the county office herself. The building smelled like paper and cold air. It was quiet but not peaceful, more like a place where heavy truths were kept. A detective named Harris met us in a small interview room. He was steady, calm, and asked clear questions. I told him everything, from the first shadow of suspicion to the terrifying discovery in the basement. When I finished, he sat back and rubbed his jaw. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "you're lucky you found this when you did." Then he added, "We can act on this today." My heart thudded in my chest. Elise wrapped her arm around me. Detective Harris organized everything quickly. He had officers collect some of the papers. He made copies. He stepped out of the room several times to speak with people in quiet voices. When he returned, he said, "We'll be visiting your house and your husband today. We need you present, but you won't be alone." The idea of seeing Daniel again made my stomach twist, but I nodded. "I understand." Within an hour, 2 police cars followed us as we drove back to my neighborhood. The closer we got to the house, the tighter my chest felt. I stared at the driveway where I used to plant flowers, wondering how long danger had been growing beside them. Daniel's car was parked outside. I felt Elise squeeze my hand. "You're not alone, Mom." Detective Harris approached Daniel first. Daniel walked out of the house looking confused at the police cars. Then he saw me standing on the walkway with my daughter and Clara behind us. For a split second, his face changed, just a flicker, but I saw it. A flash of panic, a flash of fear. Then he covered it with the same calm smile he always used. "Margaret," he said, stepping closer, "I've been worried. You didn't come home last night." My stomach turned at his voice, gentle, soft, practiced. Detective Harris stepped between us. "Mr. Hale, we need to ask you some questions." Daniel lifted his eyebrows. "Questions? About what?" Harris didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed Daniel a copy of one forged medical report. Daniel looked at it and laughed lightly. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Where did you even get—" Then Harris handed him the emails. Daniel's laugh stopped. He stared at the papers, and for the first time I saw something real in his face. Not calmness, not charm, something raw, something dark. "Where did you find these?" he asked, voice tight. "In your basement," I said. His eyes snapped to me, sharper than I had ever seen. You had no right to go down there. For my own documents? I asked, my voice steady. His jaw tightened. Clara stepped forward. Mr. Hale, we have evidence of forgery, fraud, financial abuse, and a long-term plan to place your wife into a care facility through false claims. Daniel's eyes darted from Clara to Elise to the detective. This is insane, he snapped. She's confused. She's been confused for months. That sentence, she's been confused for months, was what broke something inside me. I took a step closer, my voice calm and firm. No, Daniel, I am not confused anymore. He opened his mouth, but Harris interrupted. Mr. Hale, we'll need you to come with us for further questioning. Daniel turned to me again, his voice slipping into something colder. You have no idea what you're doing. Yes, I said quietly. I finally do. Officers moved closer. Daniel looked around as if searching for a way out. His mask cracked completely now, his face twisted in anger, shock, disbelief. This is a misunderstanding, he insisted, but his voice no longer sounded convincing. I was trying to take care of her. No, I said softly. You were trying to control me. The truth hung in the air like a loud sound. Elise stepped closer, her eyes full of anger. You almost ruined her life. Daniel looked at her with a cold stare. You never liked me anyway. Because I saw you, she said, even when she couldn't. The detective signaled the officers and they moved in. Daniel didn't fight. He just stood there, breathing hard, watching me like he no longer recognized the woman in front of him. Margaret, he said quietly, almost pleading, don't do this. But it was too late. I had already done it the moment I opened the basement door. As the officers led him toward the car, something strange happened inside me. I expected to feel triumphant or relieved or maybe even heartbroken, but instead I felt empty. Not in a painful way, more like a room that had finally been cleared after years of clutter. Quiet, still, clean. Clara placed a gentle hand on my back. You did the right thing. Elise wrapped her arms around me. I leaned into her, letting myself breathe. Detective Harris approached us. There will be more steps to follow, he said gently, but the hardest part is over. I nodded. I knew he was right. As Daniel's car pulled away, I looked at the house behind me. The same house I once painted, cleaned, decorated, and loved. But it didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a place where the truth finally came into the light, a place where lies ended, a place where masks fell. I turned to Elise and said softly, "Let's go." And for the first time in a long time, when I walked away, I didn't feel watched. I felt free. The house felt different the moment Daniel was gone. It wasn't louder or brighter. It wasn't peaceful yet either. It just felt empty, like it was taking a long breath after holding it for too many years. For the first time, I walked through the rooms without feeling watched, without feeling judged, without feeling the quiet pressure of someone planning things behind my back. Elise stayed close to me as we stepped into the living room. The curtains were half open, letting in soft afternoon light. Dust floated gently in the air. I stared at it longer than I should have, realizing how long it had been since I truly noticed the small things in my own home. "Mom," Elise said softly, "do you want to sit down?" I nodded, and we sat together on the couch. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but nothing came. I wasn't numb. I was simply tired. Tired in a deep way, like my bones remembered every year I had ignored the truth. "This place feels different," Elise said. "It finally feels honest," I whispered. She didn't respond, but she leaned her head against my shoulder, and I felt warmth spread through my chest. For months I had felt alone in my own home. Now I didn't. After a while, she helped me pack a few things, clothes, important papers, some personal items. I didn't want to stay in the house that night. Maybe not the next night either. Maybe not ever again. I just wanted to gather the pieces of my life that still belonged to me. When we reached the kitchen, I paused. The blue tiles I had chosen years earlier still shined softly in the afternoon light. I ran my hand over them, remembering all the mornings I stood there making coffee, thinking life was quiet and safe. Those memories felt distant now, but not painful. They were simply part of the life I used to have. I opened the cabinets and took some of my favorite pottery pieces, the bowls I made on quiet afternoons, the mug Michael had once used before he passed away. These pieces held real memories, honest ones. I wasn't leaving them behind. We moved to the bedroom next. The bed looked untouched, almost staged. Daniel had made it that morning. The pillows were perfectly lined. The sheets were tight. I stared at it for a moment, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. "Mom, you don't have to sleep here again," Elise said gently. "I know," I replied. "This room doesn't feel like mine anymore." I opened my nightstand and took out a small box filled with photos of my first husband. I held one picture longer than the others, a photo of Michael and me at a summer fair, laughing with ice cream on our faces. I pressed the photo against my heart and closed my eyes. He had loved me honestly, simply, fully. The contrast hurt, but it also reminded me that real love existed. I had known it once, and maybe one day I could feel peace again, perhaps not the same way, but honestly. After packing what I needed, Elise helped me carry everything to the car. Before locking the door, I turned around and looked at the house for a long time. "This place isn't bad," I murmured. "It's just full of too many wrong memories now." "Then you'll make new ones somewhere else," Elise said. Her words felt like a soft promise. We spent the next few days at her apartment. It was small but warm. She insisted I take her bedroom while she slept on the couch. Every morning she made breakfast for me, even when she had to rush to work afterward. Every night she sat beside me and asked how I was feeling, not like someone checking on me, but like someone who truly cared. During those quiet days, I learned how much I had lost without noticing. I had lost my confidence, my voice, my ability to trust my own instincts. But slowly, with every gentle morning and calm evening, some of those pieces returned. Clara called often between meetings. The case was moving forward. More evidence had been found in the basement, things even I hadn't seen, bank accounts under Daniel's name, contracts, emails, enough proof to show everything clearly. One afternoon, after a long conversation with Clara, I stepped out onto Elise's small balcony. The sky was a soft blue, the kind that makes the world feel wide. I wrapped a light sweater around myself and breathed in the fresh air. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. Not just because Daniel was gone, but because I finally chose myself. I finally listened to my own voice. I finally stopped shrinking inside my own life. Later that week, I went back to my pottery group. The women there were kind. They didn't ask many questions. They only hugged me, offered tea, and placed clay in my hands. When I touched the clay, a deep peace settled in my chest. My hands remembered the movements, the slow shaping, the gentle pressure. It felt like coming home to myself. While I worked, one of the women said, "You look lighter, Margaret." I smiled. "I feel lighter." And I truly did. That night when I returned to Elise's apartment, I sat on her couch and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not loud hope, not bright hope. Soft hope. The kind that grows slowly and quietly, like a small seed finally given enough light. As the case moved forward, Detective Harris kept me updated. Hearing about Daniel from a distance made it easier to breathe. I no longer felt trapped inside his shadow. One evening, after another call from Harris, I sat alone in the living room. Elise was out with friends. The apartment was quiet, but this quiet felt healing, not threatening. I looked at the boxes of my things stacked neatly by the wall. A new beginning, a new chapter. A home that would belong to me again, not through ownership, but through safety and truth. I closed my eyes and whispered, "You're okay now." And for the first time in a very long time, I believed it. In the weeks that followed, life moved slowly, almost gently. I spent most mornings sitting by Elise's living room window, watching sunlight move across the floor. The world outside continued as usual, people walking their dogs, cars passing by, children laughing on their way to school. It comforted me to see ordinary life again. After everything I had lived through, even the simplest scenes felt like a small gift. I often thought about the nurse at the hospital, the soft fear in her voice when she whispered, "Ma'am, don't go home tonight." Her warning had pulled me out of danger before I even understood what that danger was. Sometimes I imagined what would have happened if she had stayed silent, if she had simply called my name like any other patient and let me walk back into that house with blind trust. That thought always sent a chill through me, but then I would remind myself, I listened. I didn't doubt her. I didn't brush it off the way I had brushed off so many small signs in the past. That simple decision, choosing to listen, might have saved my life. It made me think about how many women ignore their own instincts because they don't want to seem dramatic, because they don't want to make trouble, because they've been taught to be gentle, forgiving, and patient even when patience is harming them. I had been one of those women, not anymore. One afternoon, Elise and I visited the old house. The case was almost complete, but the detectives needed me to identify a few more items. Driving there felt strange. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. My heart beat faster, even though I kept telling myself, "He's gone. You're safe. You have nothing to fear now." Still, walking through the front door felt like stepping into a memory I wasn't ready to see. The house was quiet, empty, and cold. Without Daniel's presence, it looked smaller somehow, less powerful, less threatening. Just a building with walls and floors, a place that had once fooled me. I walked slowly through each room. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway. They looked the same, yet carried none of the heaviness they used to. Elise stayed close behind me, touching my arm whenever my steps slowed. When I reached the basement door, I paused. My breath caught just for a moment as memories flashed through my mind, the silver key, the cold room, the folders with my name. But instead of fear, I felt something else now. Strength. I opened the door and walked down. The basement was brighter than I remembered. The detective had moved most of the boxes, leaving only a few behind. I stood in the center of the room, looking at the empty shelves. This was the place Daniel had planned my future without me. But here I was, alive, aware, and in control of my own life again. "Mom," Elise said softly from the stairs. "I'm all right," I told her, and I truly was. We left the house quietly. I locked the door, handed the key to the detective, and felt something inside me settle. A chapter had closed, not with anger, not with shouting, just quiet acceptance. In the days after that, I began to build a new routine. I found a small apartment not too far from Elise. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and full of light. I hung my pottery pieces on the shelves. I bought a new kettle. I placed fresh flowers on the kitchen table every week because it made the room feel alive. I started walking to the library again. The staff welcomed me with open arms, offering gentle smiles and warm hugs. I returned to reading sessions with children, story hours with seniors, and the quiet peace of organizing shelves. The library had always been a safe place for me, and it felt comforting to return to it. Every now and then, someone would stop me and say, "You look different, Margaret, lighter," and I would smile because it was true. I had learned that healing doesn't always come from big changes. Sometimes it comes from small, quiet choices, like trusting your instincts, asking for help, or choosing yourself after years of choosing everyone else. Sometimes healing is simply giving yourself permission to breathe again. One evening, I sat alone in my new living room, holding a cup of tea. The lights were dim and soft. The air felt warm and safe. I closed my eyes and thought about everything that had happened. The whisper, the fear, the discovery, the truth, the freedom. It all felt like pieces of a long, painful story that had finally reached a calm ending. Not a perfect ending, but an honest one. I looked around the room and spoke softly, almost like a promise to myself. "You made it out." Those words gave me peace. I thought about all the women who might be sitting in rooms that no longer feel safe. Women who sense something is wrong but can't explain it. Women who ignore their own voices because someone they trust tells them they're imagining things. Women who carry quiet fear inside their homes, and I wished I could sit with each of them, calm, steady, gentle, and say, "You are not imagining it. You are not overreacting. You are not too sensitive. Your instincts are speaking. Listen." At the end of the day, life gives us many truths. Some are soft and comforting, some are sharp and difficult to face, but the truth we choose to listen to becomes the path we walk. I chose to listen to the whisper that told me to stay alive. Now, as I sit here with my cup of tea, I ask myself a final question, one that I offer to anyone who hears my story. If someone whispered a warning to you, would you listen? And I hope, truly hope, that the answer is yes.